Most systems are designed to feel relatively invisible. They sit quietly in the background, helping things run smoothly without us having to think too much about them. But for a lot of trans people, everyday systems are not always that smooth. When something doesn't quite work, the labor of navigating or fixing those issues kind of ends up falling on the very people who are most affected by them. And usually, those people are just trying to get through their day or do their job without wanting to take on this kind of extra work. And so that's what we're talking about today, all of that invisible labor and how organizations can respond in ways that are more thoughtful and sustainable for everybody. So I'm super excited to be joined by Kai. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. How about yourself?
I'm good. I feel out of breath.
It's a very invigorating roller coaster ride. I can relate. You did it.
Yes, I'm great. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really glad I did that. Okay, when we talk about system limitations affecting trans people, what, first of all, are we actually talking about when we refer to this? Because
Right.
trans people end up being the ones who notice when something doesn't work, but what things are they noticing, I guess?
hmm Yeah. Just in case somebody is new on the scene here about
Mm-hmm.
gender diversity in the workplace or as customers, there are a few different things, and we won't go into a lot of detail because we have actually previous episodes that we can link
Mm-hmm.
to if people want to go further. But at a 30,000 foot level, there's kind of 5 common areas where trans people encounter uh, systems challenges, right? It could be things like their first name field only has one. So usually it's prompting for legal first name, which can be not somebody's present first name.
Mm-hmm.
IDs are difficult to update. And so oftentimes trans people haven't been able to update their IDs so that they now have a legal name that's different from their chosen, as an example. There's
Right.
also titles, Mr., Ms., Mrs., and usually not having a gender neutral option available for folks. There's things like gender data categories that, again, are just focused on the binary of men and women and can often be missing other options.
Mm-hmm.
There's some consideration around that. There's things like people can notice insufficient washroom options. Now, that may be not per se a systems issue, but this also speaks to things that beyond systems that people are noticing and pointing out.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Communications. People can notice that either in visual or written form, they're only referencing masculine and feminine appearing people in visuals or only men and women in communications. And we
Right.
could go on, but those just give you some concrete examples where somebody comes into an organization and then has a difficult time of asking for things they need or accessing it on their own, and as a result will need to prompt or let people know if they want to. Some people can't be bothered because this is not just happening at one organization, this is
Right.
on repeat,
Mm-hmm.
in a way that can be fairly overwhelming for a lot of folks.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So with that, and you sort of reference this, that this is happening repeatedly. When it comes to that, navigating it in multiple different places, we're sort of talking about not just this. There's sort of like two elements here. There's people at work who are trans and who are trying to navigate the system that they have to work with. And then there's also this other side, which is like clients and customers who are trying to access a service or take part in something that they also are now bumping up against these barriers. So it's not a good experience for them as sort of a consumer, but it's also a pretty bad experience for people within an organization. And then those two things can sort of mix together where somebody who works for an organization can see the barriers that a client might experience and sort of
Right.
going on, and it's sort of like quite interwoven. And so
Mhm.
I was wondering what those situations can look like, both as a client and as an employee, and that kind of invisible labor, like what we mean by that when it comes to navigating those limitations.
Yeah, such a good set of points in terms of making sure we're clear about who is experiencing this and then how. And the who, you're
Mm,
right. There's a set of employees, there's a set of customers that can be trans or non-binary, and there interplay too, right? Like
Mhm.
there's something about a trans employee seeing a trans customer having a really awful time because
Right.
they can relate. Did you
Yeah.
hear that noise?
I heard it. What was that?
I think it's some ice coming down.
Oh my god.
It is at least.
It's actually a
Um,
bear on a roof, like,
yeah,
breaking in.
exactly. I mean, or a bobcat. So yeah, there's just something kind of something awful about that because
Yeah.
as trans people we can relate. Like we can be like, oh yeah, that
Mm.
just happened to me yesterday, right?
Right.
And that could be distressing to notice that the organization that one is a part of hasn't addressed this yet. And
Mhm.
um, so the invisible labor that we're talking about is basically um, and organizations more generally tend not to solve issues until somebody tells them that something's wrong. And
Right.
so that puts the onus on that person to raise the matter with the
Mm.
organization. And there is there's like we calling it labor, and the fact that it's invisible is that basically it's not very apparent to organizations that this is happening in the background.
Mhm.
um, Not a lot of trans people share because I mean we'd pretty much be describing our daily lives. Like it would
Right.
it would just take a long time, and like
Mhm.
we want to get on with our lives. So
Right.
it really puts people in a pickle where it's like, okay, something has happened. There's a gap here, and then people have to make a decision. Is this like super critical? And do I have
Mm.
the energy to address this? Um, people have varying levels of mental health and capacity
Mhm.
because dealing with so many other things, along with kind of worsening socio-political conditions here.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, people just like, okay, well, and usually if it's a, for example, a healthcare issue, people might put in the effort because they want to have access to healthcare, you know,
Mhm. Yeah.
versus like a small thing that's like annoying, um, but maybe people can't be bothered. So
Mm.
it essentially means that organizations don't know how bad it is, because perhaps they haven't investigated it, or they're unaware of what the issues are, but that inaction puts the labor on the trans or non-binary person to say something when they're already
Mm.
saddled with so much.
Right. You made like quite a good point then. Well, I mean, all of it was a good point, but the thing I want to focus on is that you talked about, for example, with healthcare. They are trans people are very motivated to
Mm,
address the systems that are maybe having these limitations because they're like, oh God, I really want to, I need this help, I need this
mhm,
care. And that is true of, like, multiple different aspects within these systems. Trans
mm,
people are facing something that they are really affected by and so are motivated to make those changes. But
yep,
often that motivation can be sort of misinterpreted as like, oh, they're happy to
right.
help. They're happy to do all of this work. And
Yeah.
so that's something I really want you to dive into, if you don't mind, because that's
Mhm.
so complicated. It creates such a high pressure, or like such a weird dynamic.
Yeah, that's so true. And I've encountered it myself. I've witnessed it in so many settings where organizations may misinterpret the urgency and maybe the energy that comes with a trans person
Mm,
pointing something out. And then if somebody asks, well, what should we do instead? They might be very motivated
mm,
to help out because
right.
they don't want other trans people to experience the same thing. It's not
Hmm.
because they made the active decision to be involved. They,
Right.
um, it's more that there's this pressure that they feel, and we've
Mm,
researched this, so this is why we know about it. Is we've
right.
asked, and time again, people, trans and non-binary folks, say, "I provide free education to people in our organization. I provide
Hmm.
free labor." Like, and it's significant percentages too. It's upwards
Hmm.
of half.
Oh
And so
God.
this is a very big problem,
Yeah.
and one that organizations understandably want to consult with trans and
Mhm.
non-binary folks, but unfortunately haven't set up the consent process. So people are
Right.
actively choosing. Maybe they want to expand their skill set, or they're really interested in the topic, not because
Mm.
I feel really horrible that somebody else might experience this. That's not actually a choice. That's like a pressure that's put on somebody.
Right.
And it has mental health impacts. Like,
Mm.
people really suffer with the idea that others could fare the same or
Mhm.
worse than them. And so it's really important to understand this dynamic and to avoid, participating in it by setting up a
Mm.
thoughtful process. And we can talk about that a little bit later on, but it's really important to understand this dynamic.
And so there is that confusion of um, the enthusiasm and the willingness to help is not necessarily because it's something joyful and excited, something they're excited to do. It's more like, oh, this needs to be done, and no one else is going to do it unless I step in. So it's not a case of like I'm excited to help. It's like, and all while trying to navigate their life, like their job. They need to still
Yes.
perform at work.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes people or organizations think, oh, this is a simple solution,
Mm,
so it won't be a big effort. When
right.
in fact, it's actually, there's a lot involved and it's very complex
Hmm.
to the degree that some trans people might start like want to be involved. But then once they realize the layers are like, whoa, I'm way over in my head,
Yeah.
whatever the expression is. And that could add another layer of like, holy crap, I feel insufficient to
Mm,
respond to this. And I'm kind of freaking out that all of this is on my shoulders
right.
because we're 1% of the population. So likely only going to have a handful, maybe even one person, sometimes none. And so it's just like that just so, um, yeah, it's very overwhelming for those. And sometimes there can be an age factor too, right? Where if somebody is young, early in their career, they can feel like they have to,
Mm,
because maybe their job is in jeopardy. Versus somebody old, further in their career, might be able to push back and be like, "You need to hire somebody. I
right.
can't help out with this," right?
Yeah.
So it's, yeah, those are some of the additional layers, but yeah, it's not always a joyful thing. Now, I
Hmm.
will say, among some people, a few, that will be exciting and interesting. So we
Hmm.
don't want to discourage anybody from being involved if that's their interest. Also, you need to have a little expertise or understanding, but so we don't want to completely discourage. We just want to insert another layer so people, and a pause so people can make that choice that's
Right.
right for them.
Right. Yeah. I liked what you said about setting up a kind of consent process is like, and
Mhm.
checking in, I guess, on a regular basis that it's still good. And like, you're not,
Yeah.
you just because you started something doesn't mean you have to continue with it if it's,
Mhm.
like hard. Um, and on that, something that you just said was about how there does need to be a level of expertise, and I wanted you to go into that a little bit more because there is this, um, trans people are not the expert by default. They know their own experience, but that doesn't mean they can, understand the nuances and complexities of everybody's experience. And it's a lot of pressure to put on one person to be like, okay, you're trans. Tell us what trans people need. It's a lot.
All
And
trans
so
people for all time.
yeah, please speak
Um,
on behalf of all trans people. What do we need to do here? And so that
yeah.
creates a lot of pressure, and two, maybe solutions that haven't thought about or considered the complexities of other trans people's experiences. So I was wondering if you could, go into that too.
Yeah. I mean, there is a word for that, and it's tokenization. And again, people don't walk, like organizations and representatives thereof aren't intending to do all this.
Right.
But unfortunately, without being aware of these aspects or dynamics, then unfortunately they're just at play.
Hmm.
And I think it's important for organizations to take on that labor and then to involve whoever is available, interested, and whatnot. I would also caution, like you were saying, that um, there are many who painfully understand their own problems, like they're daily or frequent, and
Hmm.
so they can very well articulate them, and that's important to listen to and understand and to absorb. And of course, that's not the only experience.
Right.
Sometimes people understand the trans and non-binary community to be somewhat of a monolith,
Mm.
which no marginalized community is. It's just like
Right.
so many different aspects to it. I mean, one aspect is it's a gender spectrum. So there's non binary folks, there's trans women, there's trans men, among others, and two spirit folks. So it's just like that. Those are distinct needs, each
Mm.
one of them. Sure, there might be some things that are tying them together, and you could address that and it speaks to all of their experiences. Sure. But then there's other layers that are sometimes invisible if and not balanced. So somebody who's non-binary is like, this is what I need, but that might then be different from what a trans woman needs.
Mm.
And if there's a adequate expertise, you could have a solution that could be for both, or to know that you need two different solutions, if
Right.
you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One for a non-binary person, one for a trans woman, right?
Mm.
So or just the concepts of like choice among options, or
Mhm.
um, you know uh, flexibility, or um, yeah, just there's kind of principles that we have at Transfocus that allow for the variety of solutions that are necessary.
Right.
And then of course we're not even getting into or we should be getting into also intersectionality, right?
Right.
So sometimes there's a lot of white trans people that are raising the alarm bells. And unfortunately, given how much is already on trans people of color or trans people with disabilities plates, they don't have the energy to
Right.
raise the issues, but then they're not there to provide the solutions they need.
Mhm.
So
Right. Yeah.
it's just like that's where just listening to one person is insufficient,
Mhm.
even if they have a lot to contribute.
Mhm.
So I would say if they have experience with other um, uh, kind of consultation processes where maybe multiple views were at play
Mhm.
or involved in an organization in the past, maybe that's different, so
Right.
that they could be like, okay, this is my need, but this, you need to also consider this and this and this.
Mhm.
So that's all at play and needs to be carefully considered.
Right. And then there's also like
Yeah.
the stuff that you work with this balance of not just trans and non-binary people's needs, but also cis
Mhm.
people's needs and making those changes. And there's a
Yeah.
lot to really think about and consider. And so with that, then obviously you've talked about how a lot of trans people are just exhausted and the only reason they're working towards this is because something needs to happen. But there are those
Mhm.
people who raise the issue and would really like to see it through and really want to be a part of the process. And so I was wondering how that balance works
Mhm.
with taking the question to an expert, but while also including the people who want to be involved, who kind
Yeah.
of raised the issue in the first place, and this is their,
Right.
passion and something that they really want to be involved in. Having that kind of consent piece, but also not just blocking them out and being like, "Well, we've hired Transfocus now, so don't worry about it."
Right. Move aside.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's
Like
awful.
that balance, it must be quite tricky
Mhm.
sometimes or is it? I don't know, I've guessed.
Yeah, that's such a good point. For people who want to be involved, it's a very bad idea to kind of move them aside. Um, Certainly, it helps to have someone like ourselves in the mix, because then we can kind of bring them with in a way that doesn't burden them, right?
Right. Yeah.
Where that person or perhaps a few others maybe want to be in an advisory role
Mm.
where we do the heavy lifting because we have the know-how. We also can consult with, have listening sessions or surveys, so many different ways to gather feedback from people who just want to do a one-off thing and say, this is all the things I deal with, do with it what you will.
Mhm.
And then for us to put something together, then that we give to this advisory and be like, hey, what do you think? And then they provide like really important salient points that we've
Mm.
either missed or that need to be refined or added to. And so that collaborative piece is super powerful. Like
Right.
I always very much appreciate when I can work with trans folks, trans and non-binary folks on these types of things.
Mm.
And so definitely recommend to have that kind of advisory role, but certainly not the I mean, we do a massive amount of work. And for somebody to do that off the side of their desk, like that would be
Yeah.
asking a lot. But I think they are some of them are very curious and interested and
Hmm.
really enjoy somebody having done the heavy lifting, but they're still involved and at key points where they can make pivotal moves that really tailor it to the organization.
Hmm.
And so definitely think there's a role for them. It's just figuring out like which one and how. And that definitely is a huge part of skill development
Hmm.
for them if they don't already have those skills, right? And so there's that piece. And I like what you said also about factoring in cisgender people, because if we don't, which when we survey or do listening sessions, we do involve cisgender people.
Hmm.
And like we have a separate set of questions for them. And that gives us a real good temperature check
Mm.
um, in a way that's safe for the cisgender people, because oftentimes they're worried about saying the wrong thing or getting fired or whatever, but
Mm.
they still hold these ways of thinking or beliefs that can hamper progress. And so it's good to know about them.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's great, like, wow, we're really you know, in a good position. And then other times, organizations are a little surprised by what people actually think,
Right.
um, eh, like with anonymity.
Mm.
So all of those are really important to know, regardless of what the outcome is. So
Hmm.
that's why important to involve them. And more often than not, it's just people don't know what to do, and so
Right.
that's good to know as well. Yeah.
So, with the trans and non binary people who really are wanting to be involved in the process of changing things and making things better in the workplace, what are some considerations that organizations should, yeah, really think about?
Yeah. So there's the kind of proper setup in terms
Mm.
of the process and clearly defining it rather than it going on forever and ever. But,
Right.
it's 5 meetings, it's going to be, 2 hours of your time, things like that.
Hmm.
Um, it's helpful to have like a terms of reference for any, say, advisory committee or such not. So
Mm.
you might already be the practice of your organization, but this topic also deserves that.
Hmm.
Uh, a really important thing that often gets overlooked is that the expectation is that this is free labor and
Right.
almost like it's covered under your salary or maybe there's an
Mm.
hourly. But all that to say is it is separate work and it needs to be compensated. Um,
Right.
Now, I appreciate their budgetary considerations, and maybe there's not large unending pools of money lying around.
Right.
But that said, even some amount of compensation is really important. There might be, in lieu of cash or dollar payments, there could be other ways to acknowledge, right? Gift cards and you know, whoever you might have benefits that you could tap into to
Hmm.
give to people to acknowledge that people are putting in literal labor. And
Mm.
I think that often gets missed. And then people are doing it kind of out of the kindness of the heart, which they will do, but I don't
Right.
know how ethical it is. So that would be an
Right.
important
Yes.
part to add into it. And sometimes it also, if some stuff is done virtually, others is done in person. If
Hmm.
it's in person, also thinking about the transportation to that as well. So it's not just the
Right.
compensation, but you know, taxi, Uber, mileage, that kind of thing.
Mm. So to kind of close up then, just more looking at the work that Transfocus does and like
Mm,
what the role of Transfocus is with a lot of organizations that you've worked with. And yeah, I was wondering about what approach you take when it comes to looking at this on a more strategic way or kind of addressing the
mm,
system limitations in practice that would
mm.
maybe not be as obvious if you were just, I don't know, relying on one trans person to do all of the heavy lifting.
Oh my gosh, right? I mean, a lot of it comes down to trade-offs, and
Mm.
I think organizations would love, and individuals too, like one silver bullet that takes care
Right.
of everything.
Yes.
I wish that were the case. I'm still looking for it. But usually it's actually a set of decisions informed by, context and like what's actually happening in the organization. But we're often saying, okay, there's, this way forward, this way, and this way. Maybe we have like a few options. And then it's about like sometimes we have a structured decision making process where we're
Right.
weighting all these criteria and factors that are important to the organization and also important to individuals
Hmm.
to be able to have a decision that you can feel good about and that you
Right.
can back up. And
Right.
you can explain to people who might not be super thrilled by the decision,
Right.
but you can explain it, right? And I
Hmm.
think that's a much better position than kind of willy nilly,
Hmm.
throwing stuff on the wall and being like, did it stick?
Right. I
And
get that.
yeah, no, we don't need that. We can be thoughtful and intentional. And then on the back end, in the implementation side, be very careful and sensitive to how it's shared. To
Hmm.
be like, we understand this is important. We weren't able to do this. We got this other way. It meets a lot of needs, but not everything. And we recognize that.
Right.
It's super simple,
Hmm.
but that kind of thoughtful decision making makes that possible.
Hmm.
I think invisible labor is a really important factor, certainly not only experienced by trans and non binary folks. I think any marginalized group has some aspect of invisible labor. So it's a broader issue. So if you're able to figure it out with trans and non binary folks, that's a good model to
Mm.
replicate for other marginalized groups so
For
that we
sure.
can take off that labor. People are really having a hard time. And so any little bit of labor we can take off their plate and include them if they want to be in a thoughtful way that's not overwhelming, so much the
Mm.
better. If you're wanting support with decision making as part of alleviating labor for trans and non-binary folks in your midst, I mean, definitely thank them if they've identified something, and then good to pivot to someone else. But if you're wanting to pivot to trans focus to help out with that, we'll put a link in the show notes to just a bit of a description about what that looks like, and happy to have a conversation to continue to better understand your needs.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Kai.
Thank you too.
We'll see you next week.
All right, bye for now.
Bye.